One of the most memorable movie experiences I've had in my childhood was when I first watched the huge battle scenes from Lord of the Rings. I remember seeing these epic battles and being amazed with the scale and realism of it. We actually had the movie trilogy on Blu-ray or DVD or whatever, and it had this Beyond the Scenes disc that I just played over and over again. And looking back, that was probably one of those turning points where I was like, this is what I want to do. Back then I understood that there was something called computer graphics, but it was something that was really beyond what a single person could do, and it required these crazy computers and huge teams of incredible artists. But now, when the computers we can own as individuals are much better than back then, and anyone with internet can access production quality software for free, creating this kind of stuff is not so far away anymore. So in this video I'm gonna take a stab at creating my own large-scale battle simulation on my gaming PC using the free 3D software Blender. And to challenge my artistic and technical skills, I've decided to do as much of it as possible from complete scratch. Not the horses though, I'm not sculpting horses. Alright, so here's the basic idea. In Blender we can use particle systems to simulate these points using Boyd physics, and we can give them rules so they can follow each other, they can separate if they're too close to each other, and they can also attack each other. Then we can take these points from the particle simulation and use a particle instance modifier to instance these edges here so that we retain the rotation data. And then we can feed these edges into a geometry nodes tree where we handle all of the scattering of these characters, and also we're gonna do some animation blending depending on the speed of the particles, and also blend to an attack animation when the particles are closer to an enemy particle. And here I haven't done the attack blending yet, so they just run into each other. But what we do have is some blending from a standing pose to a running cycle, and you can see they kind of squish like this, so that's something I'm gonna have to fix for the final scene. But basically they run towards each other, and I'm gonna make them fight here, and you can see the rotation is correct and everything. That's pretty promising for our final scene. First of all, we need some character models. To save some time, I imported the base mesh I made for my upcoming short film and used that as a base to sculpt on. I started off with orcs, sculpting the face to give it these pointy ears and orc-like facial features. Then I sculpted one tooth using a subdivided cube, and using a mirror modifier created a set of orc teeth. I want to take a quick moment to thank this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online community for creatives, and there are thousands of really high quality classes on everything from filmmaking and 3D visual effects to music production, writing, and even business and career related topics. Don't get me wrong, learning on YouTube can be awesome, I do it all the time, but sometimes it's nice to be able to just sit down with a course that takes you exactly where you want to go. It's especially useful for us Blender users, since learning a new software this complicated can be really hard. And I remember starting out and not really knowing where to begin. Skillshare solves this issue with step-by-step courses and learning paths made by professionals in the area where you want to learn. Skillshare is right now giving away a free month of full access for absolutely free to the first 500 people to go through the link in the description. So now is a great time to get started. Claim that free month now, and then when you have time, check out this awesome learning path by Alden Peters to get a huge learning boost in Blender visual effects creation. Big thanks to Skillshare for bringing this video to you. Then I started to work on the orc armor. In the movies they have this awesome mix of black plate armor and leather details, but since my characters would only be seen from very far away, I could get away with a lot less detail and variation. The main thing I tried to capture were these layered armor plates and the kind of pointy edges. I also made this simple orc helmet, which actually turned out pretty cool. I went back and overhauled the materials later, but for reference I gave it this simple black metal texture. This armor set feels almost insulting to the original costume design, but I think it captures the basic feel that I was going for. Then I did some simple texture painting on the face and body of the orc, and since I have deuteranom color blindness, a good trick I've learned is to import a reference image and use the eyedropper tool to pick color nuances from that image. And I believe this actually helps the colors blend together better, but what do I know? Then I went on to create the Rohan inspired soldiers, giving it a more shiny metal look and using these pattern textures to add some simple details. To create the cloth material underneath the armor, I duplicated the base mesh and simulated it using cloth simulation, using a vertex group to pin it down in certain areas. I knew I wanted to have armored horses in my battle scene, so I started sculpting a horse and then got flashbacks to my previous attempts and went straight to Sketchfab instead. I found this beautiful model made by Naminoff. So shout out to you, man, you obviously know your stuff. After importing the model and rigging it using the built-in Rigify add-on, I imported this reference footage and animated the run cycle or gallop cycle by hand. I created some really low poly weapons using images and just cutting out the shapes using the knife tool, and now I had pretty much all the assets I needed for the final scene. In order to be able to animate a 3D character, you need two things. You need a skeleton, or an armature as it's usually called, and you need weight groups. The weight groups are basically just information for the program to know which part of the object should follow which bones. All this is possible to do by hand, but since the process is really tedious and I'm not very good at it, I prefer using auto-rigging algorithms when I can. The easiest way to do this is to export your model as an FBX file and import it into the Adobe website called Mixamo. Then you just place these markers to help the algorithm and it does the rest for you. Alright, so here I am putting on the motion capture suit from Rokoko. Just put a power bank in it, and then plug it in using the cable and do the Wi-Fi setup. So it's connected to your home Wi-Fi, and then just calibrate it. And yeah, as you can see, it just kind of works. It's pretty awesome. So I'm just gonna put on the actual gloves so we get some detail in the hand animation, and then I'm gonna record some motion capture. I put on the smart gloves. They just connect using a USB-C cable and they draw the same power from the battery pack here. We have the suit data already applied to our character here, and now we have this hand data. You can see with these floating ghost hands here. And basically what we need to do to apply the data from the hands is just to drag these onto the character here. And there we go. As you can see, we need to calibrate it a little bit more. Just gonna make sure all of the sensors are in their right place. Then I'm gonna recalibrate it. Then we're ready to go. If you're interested in getting a motion capture suit of your own, check out Rokoko's Indie Creator Bundle for a 40% discount. And if you want to support the channel while doing so, I'll leave an affiliate link and an additional 5% discount code in the description. Once I had rigged all of my characters, I imported the motion capture data from Rokoko Studio to Blender and then retargeted the animation using the Rokoko add-on. Since every animation needed to loop, I cut out only the keyframes I needed, then duplicated it before and after, and then in the graph editor selected the in and out parts and hit Alt-O a couple of times to smooth it out. This creates a pretty seamless loop and works for most animations. To get the archer orcs to actually fire arrows, I used a blend of different techniques. To get the bow to bend, I used a simple shape key, and then to get the line to actually move back with the hand, I used the hook modifier and assigned this middle vertex to a vertex group so it moved only that. I animated the arrows using a bunch of different constraints, and to have it loop after the arrow had been fired, it just teleports back to the quiver on his back. I made 3 states for each character: idle, running and attacking, and then to spice it up a little bit I simulated some extra details using cloth simulation, like the horse tail and I think it's called mane, the robe and the hair on the archers. To simplify the final scene, the idea was to export the finished animations as Alembic files. This makes it so that every character is its own complete object, and it can support all kinds of animations and deformations, so you can combine the rigged character with these simulations into one object. As long as the vertex naming is in the same order between these states, it should be possible to smoothly blend between the different animations. Alright, so now we have all of our characters finally completed, and everything is baked to Alembic files, so we just have like one object for each character, and we have 3 animations for each character. Let's take a look at this horse, for example. We have one idle, we have one running, and we have one attacking. And then we're gonna use geometry nodes to blend between those depending on different factors like the distance to an enemy or the speed. And as you can see, I've only assigned the materials to the idle poses because we're gonna use that as a base, and then we're gonna use geometry nodes to blend to these other animations. So if we take a look at this orc, for example, we have the idle, running and attacking, and then we have this geometry node set up right here. So right now we're blending between the idle animation and the attack animation. And you can see, because the vertices are named the same, we can like smoothly blend between the animations like this. So let's try to blend it to the running animation. So I'm just gonna select the orc run here, and we can see now it's off, and now we can smoothly have him start running. So that's pretty awesome. Oh, and for the archer guy here, I only have one animation, since I'm gonna have them be static and just shoot their arrows like this. And we're gonna be able to duplicate this guy many times and then offset the animation a little bit, and we're gonna have like an arrow rain here. When all my characters were animated, I started working on a simple terrain for the fight to take place in. So I imported some satellite data using the free GIS add-on, and then blended in some high resolution textures from Polyhaven based on the distance from the camera. Then I simulated all of these particles fighting each other and instanced the characters on those points using geometry nodes. Alright, so to get the horses, it's just as simple as duplicating this knight instance object here. Just duplicate that, leave it right there, and we're gonna rename it to horse instance, and we're gonna set the particle instance to the horse army particles. Now you can see they follow the horse particles here, and they travel a bit faster, but they still look like human people. So we go to this geometry node and switch to the geometry layout here, and then right here we can just duplicate this. That creates a new node tree. And in this little node tree here, let's just create a new one here, tab into that, and change it from knight idle to horse idle, and then knight run to horse run. And then let's also change the attack, and let's see what that looks like. Yeah, we have some horses. You can see they naturally avoid their friends, and then hopefully they're gonna start attacking the orcs. To get some dust kicking up from the horse galloping, I used the horse particle system to emit smoke and then bake that to a VDB file. Then I imported it back into the scene, and it really adds a lot of atmosphere to the battlefield with this volumetric lighting. I animated some simple camera movements and rendered out a couple of thousand frames. Then I cut out only the best parts and edited that into the final scene. I did some basic compositing with a bit of haze and lens dirt, and added this bluish color grade to give it a gritty look. After adding a bit of sound effects and music, this was the final scene. One limitation of instancing Alembic files like this is that you can't really use Blender's built-in motion blur. So instead I had to rely on the much inferior optical flow motion blur in post. The difference is that real sampled motion blur actually looks at the speed of your objects and gives a much more accurate result, while optical flow motion blur just looks at the pixels moving after the fact and tries to guess which part should be blurred out or not. This kind of gets the job done, but it looks much less like a real camera motion blur, and in my case it also led to some glitches which made some frames unusable. Anyways, let me know what you think of the final scene, and as always there's a bunch of small things that stick out to me, like the animation of the horses not lining up with the speed properly, and this weird flickering artifact on some of the characters, but as a whole I'm super happy with the look I achieved. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.